Now, some mistakes that I made on the grammar SAT portion included like just not fully knowing how you have to encounter every single problem on the grammar SAT portion. Now, what I mean is that the grammar SAT portion like really specifically wants you to know like these certain rules, right? And the rules are all mentioned like almost everywhere on the internet and even on the SAT official website, right? And I knew most of these rules, right? There was just a couple of them that I didn't fully know. And on those, I thought that just simply figuring out the answer that sounded the most correct, right? Based on my own intuition, I'm the native English speaker. I would be able to understand this. But that wasn't the case because the SAT is designed not actually it's designed to distract you from the correct answer by making other answer choices sound more correct. Right. And if you fully understand how to encounter these kind of problems, you're going to get an extra 15 to 25% of your section correct. Now, a 1600 score fully understands every single grammar portion concept. They fully understand everything about it, and they don't have to rely on their like memory of some other passage. They don't have to rely on any specific intuition, right? It's almost that they can identify exactly the rule being used and how to apply it. Hi, I'm Karthik, and these are SAT grammar tips that are definitely going to be tested on your next SAT. So before you read the question, right, you need to be able to identify the exact skill being tested, right? You should be able to, before you read all the choices, you should be able to understand that, okay, this passage is highlighted and the small portion of the question here, that tells me that this question is testing blank skill, right? And if you don't know exactly what skill is being tested, you need to understand better all the concepts that are on the test, right? Because if you don't fully understand the skill that they want to test you on, that gives an opportunity for you to make a mistake, right? So increase your mastery of all the skills tested if you're not able to identify what a specific question is asking. Is it related to do with punctuation? Is it related to do with the run-on sentence, right? You need to fully identify what that is. And as soon as you're able to, it's literally instantly going to improve your speed because you're just going to know exactly what to do and know what the right thing is. But it's also going to instantly improve your accuracy. You're going to get more questions correct just because you know the skill. You know exactly what is being tested and what you're being tested on at that very moment. Now, here's another mistake that I made. Does it sound right? So I would read answer choices and I would see like, oh, is this correct? Is this not correct? And I would like read both of them out like in the sentence. I'd be like, oh, that one doesn't sound right. Or, this one actually sounds more right. So I'm going to go with that. And that's actually a huge mistake on the grammar SAT. You shouldn't be using your ear. Right. And even though your ear might be right like 75% of the time or right 100% of the time on certain question types, that's not always the case. And the grammar SAT has answer choices that are specifically designed to get you to mess up on questions like that. Phrases can sound correct, right? And sometimes even be correct just because you think it's correct. And they can even be grammatically correct in the sentence. But there's one more concept or a concept that is tested on the SAT that you don't fully understand as a result, and making that answer choice incorrect, even though it's grammatically correct and it sounds correct in the sentence, right? By using a grammar rule and not what you think sounds right, using your ear, you're going to significantly improve your accuracy, right? Your ear might have helped you in the past and with certain types of questions, but if you want to really aim and be the 1600 scorer, you need to know exactly what concepts are tested on grammar. Now, idioms. And I put this one first because this is the only exception to the previous rule I said using your ear. Now, idioms are a standard convention of English. We use them all the time, and they're actually like exceptions to grammar rules, right? There's ways that that certain words are used in certain expressions that you just hear them and they sound incorrect because that's not how we use conventional English and language. And when we speak to each other, like saying certain things might be wrong, right? And if you want to identify which are the incorrect ones, you're just going to have to experience more idioms, right? When you practice the SAT, you're going to read out sentences and you're going to identify that this is an idiom phrase, right? Because it sounds incorrect and it's in a very specific matter and it uses a specific word as well. So if you want to improve on this, you simply have to encounter more. There's no formula that you can get to actually know this. This is just a standard English convention that you probably already have ingrained in your head if you speak English at all, right? So identify the incorrect ones when you see the incorrect usage. Now, here are some examples, right? The kid who won was awarded of a gold medal versus the kid who won was awarded a gold medal, right? Now, one obviously sounds more correct than the other. And remember, this is an exception to the play by ear rule. These are idioms specifically. And, the one that sounds more correct, like more that you would use in fluid English, is correct, right? He insists at being that way versus he insists on being that way, right? When you say you insist on being that way versus at being that way, like you can tell that one isn't used that often. One, even though it's grammatically correct and it's grammatically more correct than the one that sounds that it's used more often, the one that's used more often, right, in this idiom example is the one that you should go with because it's the one that flows correct as it's like standard convention of English. Now, subject-verb agreement. So the key with subject-verb agreement is identifying correct nouns, right? You need to identify at the beginning of the sentence, right? What is the exact subject, right? You might have done this in elementary school when you were learning about parts in speech and you identified the noun despite other phrases being in there that also might be nouns but aren't the subject of the actual sentence, right? So identify the subject, the correct noun that the verb is referencing, right? That's how you figure out what the subject is. What is the verb referencing? Like what specific thing is doing the action, that thing, and that verb that you're trying to find agreeance to should be agreeing to the subject, right? So the first way to do this is to cross out phrases that aren't relevant. You need to look at the whole passage and then you can physically cross it out if you're taking a digital or taking a paper SAT. Obviously, you can't really do it on digital and highlighting it would be kind of a pain. So I recommend actually just reading it and just mentally crossing out the section, mentally realizing, okay, that section is just a prepositional phrase. That section is just something that's an added detail but isn't the subject, right? So then you need to figure out if the subject is singular or plural, right? It's that easy. That's something that we all can probably do. And you need to figure out what is the right tense for that noun specifically. Isolate the noun, then find the verb that you need to find the right tense to and make sure they line up. So here's an example of a sentence I just made up and how I used the method, right? I crossed out the external phrases and then I figured out what the actual subject was and then how the verb needs to agree with that. So keys is obviously the subject here, right? Because the were/was, right? The phrase in the middle, right? The comma phrase is just a descriptor of keys, but it doesn't have any subject in it, right? The keys is what was or were reddish in color here, right? So keys, plural, right? Keys is multiple, so you use were. So the keys were reddish in color. If I were to put that as a sentence alone, you need to isolate the noun here and then just figure out what verb matters. And as soon as you get good at just doing this, it becomes so easy and you can get all of these right within 10, 20 seconds of looking at the problem. Now, here's some extra tips, right? If you really want to solidify all these concepts and the tips at the very beginning that I showed you, you need to practice many different examples of the problems. And that's more specific to the problem types as well, but utilize the tips, right? Obviously, idioms is an expression, and that's why I included it in here, but just identify exactly what concepts are being used and don't use your ear. Actually figure out this is the concept, this is the rule, therefore this is the right answer. And just doing that increases your accuracy and speed by so much. Now you need to practice these kind of problems and, feel free to use free online resources to find problems and answers. There's so many online and you can go on Khan Academy and find them and they have the most accurate questions to the SAT. You can go SAT practice test. There's so many places where you can find problems and answers and detailed explanations if you really need them. And also, you can always consult someone more experienced than you, right? If you have a older brother or just a older sister, some person who's taken the SAT, some person who actually knows this, you can contact them and figure out what you actually don't know and have them explain the problem to you. That also works. So understanding all of these concepts and utilizing the tips can literally boost your score 25%, right? And a lot of people will claim that, oh, this is going to boost your score if you do, etc. Understanding these concepts and applying these tips will increase your score a significant amount because those questions make up a moderate portion of the SAT grammar, right? I'm offering SAT prep. If you're interested in that, apply in the link description below. And thank you guys so much. And I hope you learned something today.